Okay, so we're live. So I am. This is another opportunity to connect with our taxpayers here in the community, and citizens and families about the school budget vote that's coming up. And the school budget vote is going to be on Tuesday, March 2nd. There is a formal information night that's on March 1st, but this year, because of COVID, we have to go. We're going to have to go remote. So it's going to be a virtual town meeting information night. And so what we're hoping to do is to have a couple of information sessions through technology like this with people in the community as we go. So if you don't know, well, let me let the people around the table introduce themselves first, and then we can get into a little bit about this technology and how you can interact with us. We'll have some information for you, but we also want to make sure we answer as many of your questions as we can. If there's some that we can't, we'll be sure to get back to you as well. So on my screen, maybe I'll go right beneath me. And Patty, how about you introduce yourself?
I'm Patty Kemp. I'm first year member of the school board.
And Troy?
I'm Troy Palmer. I'm the current school board chair.
And Rick?
Hi, I'm Rick Pembroke. I'm the Chief Financial Officer for the district.
Great. And and I didn't introduce myself. I have a tendency to not do that sometimes. I'm Zach McLaughlin. I'm the superintendent of schools here in Springfield. So so a little bit about StreamYard. So right now I can see, for example, that we've got 26 people viewing us. And there's two different platforms you could be viewing us live. This will also be something that's recorded, and we hope to have available on our Facebook page and my professional YouTube page. Those are the two places right now you can see this broadcast live. So if you're going by the Springfield School District Facebook page, that you're getting a live feed from that. And then if you go to Zach McLaughlin on YouTube, you get the right Zach McLaughlin. There's several of us running around the country. Then you also get a live feed of this as well. If you put questions or comments into the feed underneath where it is being broadcast on Facebook, we'll get an opportunity to have those come into us, and then we'll start selecting questions that we can answer. And the same thing on YouTube. If you're viewing this from the YouTube page, you can, on the side, there's a spot where you can put in questions and comments. And again, we'll select as many of those as we can during the hour if we need the hour, to answer. So what I'm gonna do to get us started and to frame the budget, some of you have already probably seen on our webpage this particular video. But it's a 2-minute video that we put together really quickly to just kind of inform you about this year. What are the key questions that are on the ballot that are related to the schools, and how this ballot has a question that's usually something that's done at town meeting night before we ever get to the ballot. And it's an important one to understand because it's an important one for us to, no matter what people do on the vote about the budget, it's an important one for us just to be able to operate day to day. So I'm going to pull up that video really quick. We'll run through that, and then we can talk about a couple other resources that are available to people in the community if you want to get more information about the budget, and then we'll answer as many of your questions as we can. All right, so let's get that video up first.
Hi, and thanks for checking out this video on the upcoming Springfield School District budget vote. On March 2nd, Springfield citizens will vote on a variety of budget requests from different organizations around town. The school district has 4 money items and 1 procedural vote on the ballot. The first school item on the ballot is a unique one in that they are only due to coronavirus. Article 7 is usually just a procedural floor vote. It passes every year and is one of the only items that is voted on at the public information night. This year, there is no in-person meeting due to COVID-19, so it's been added to the ballot. It allows the district to short-term borrow when tax revenue payments may not yet have come in. The next 2 are exactly what they were last year. Do you approve giving the elected town moderator $50 for running necessary school budget meetings? And then, do you approve giving every school board member $500 to help cover their expenses? Both of these numbers are already included in the overall school budget. Then come the big ones. In Article 10, you'll vote on a $32.4 million budget to run the schools next year. This budget will result in an anticipated 3.68 cent tax cut for Springfielders who pay the school property tax. Also, it's important to remember that based on the state funding formula, Springfield taxpayers only contribute between 1/3 and 1/4 of that $32.4 million. Finally, in Article 11, the district asked voters to approve the creation of a tax stabilization fund and permission to move $400,000 worth of surplus from last year's school budget into that fund. The purpose of the fund will be to help limit the fluctuations of tax rates over the next few budget cycles. Thanks for taking 2 minutes to educate yourself on the upcoming school budget vote. We hope to do more videos in the coming days. Remember, there is an online information session the night of Monday, March 1st. The actual vote is on Tuesday, March 2nd, but you can request your absentee ballot right away by reaching out to the town clerk's office at 802-885-2104 or by filling out an absentee ballot request from the town's website.
So, again, it's something we've had up. We encourage you to share with people if you have it, if you've seen it, and you have an opportunity to share with other people to have an opportunity to create some base understanding for people about what's going to be coming up in the budget. I also want to point out 2 other ways over the long run. There are some things that you can do to get additional information from us about what's in the specific budget. So one of those is a place where you can email specific budget questions. So I'm going to go ahead and show you really quickly. Oh, give me just a minute. Sorry. So this particular email address, and we'll make sure we share this in a Facebook post later on, budgetquestion@ssdvt.org, Springfield School District, Vermont.org. If you send your questions there, we will make sure they get rerouted to people, the appropriate people in the district to help answer those questions for you. We're also building a frequently asked question document. So as we get some questions that we're hearing regularly from folks, we're building a resource that we can post online so people can go and see questions that some of their neighbors may have asked about some things that are happening with the school budget. So that's one resource for you. The other one, the last one I want to show you is just on our website and where you can go on the school district website in order to get some additional information. So let me put that up real quick. So here's the school district website. If you're someone who's followed us in the past and you kind of know instinctually that it's going to be over here, over kind of in this neck of the woods is where you're going to see usually where the budget information is. But of course, with COVID-19's taken over where in the past we would have put some budget stuff. So now where you need to go is to central office. And then if you scroll down from central office, you get to budget information. And we're going to do some additional curating of this, where we're going to give some kind of annotated notes to what each of these things are. But these are the key budget documents from this particular conversation that we've had as we built the budget to send to you, the voters. And this is this budget that we're discussing that you'll be voting on is fiscal year 22, FY 22, which is school year 21-22. And there's a lot of good detailed information here about where we're specifically spending stuff. There's some letters that are overviews about things, and you also are some documents that represent some of the dialogue and changing of thought process we had over time. So those are those key places you can go to get some additional information. So I also know right now we've got 34, we've had 37 just a minute ago viewers. And I just want to remind people that if you're on Facebook watching us, that if you click on the the comments section right underneath the video, you can send in questions to us that we can try to help you out with. Because right now I don't have any. So that's part of why I'm re-queuing you. Also, if you're on YouTube, same thing. You can do that. You can do something.
Zach, on the website, can you show them where the frequently asked questions, is that posted yet?
Not yet. We hope to have that on the page that I just showed people. That's where the first thing we hope to have on there, either by the end of business tomorrow or beginning of the week next week, would be that frequently asked question document. Right now we've got one. So we're hoping to build on that and to answer as many people's questions as we can and be as transparent as we can.
I'm just wondering if I can grab it from somewhere so we can at least show it. Because I think that's a good question and a good answer.
Well, if we want to talk about then maybe, well, I think I know where I can go to track it down. If we want to talk about, we did during the budget process, we ultimately ended up deciding, we were trying to thread the needle between knowing how tough COVID's been on everybody in the community, both in so many ways, but financially being one of them and being cognizant of that. At the same time, knowing that we're going to have to pop out of COVID and be ready to help kids ramp back up because, you know, doing remote learning is not the same as doing in-person learning. So we've been trying to balance those two things. And ultimately, along the way, we made a few small, not small, I mean, we cut a couple of positions back to half-time. And I don't know if somebody wants to speak to that a little bit more about that conversation and dialogue we had, and then I can see if I can find this other material.
I just forwarded it to emailed it to you, Zach.
Great, thank you.
So I can speak about the reductions a little bit. We went through several budget meetings, the school board along with the budget committee. We had over 8 different meetings to review the budget. We spent a particular amount of time looking at the high school, looking at school enrollment or class enrollment, looking at class offerings in different aspects. And when it came down to the end, we looked at it and it looked as though a reduction to a half PE position, a half music, and a half art position were necessary to be fiscally responsible with our budget, to look at saving money for the taxpayers, but also the course offerings for the students, even though there'll be a small amount less, it's very much identical to what we currently see right now for the students at the high school. In looking around the state at different schools our size, if you looked at the staff ratios for those programs at different schools, this will fall in line more with what other schools around the area offer. So although it feels like a reduction, it's really a necessary change to keep us fiscally responsible. Patty, anything to add since you were involved in all the meetings?
No, but I just think it's that it's important to remember that even though art they may not be getting art in a regular art class, there's other classes that they're doing art in. The give me, my mind is blank tonight.
Cosmos U.
Yeah, the Cosmos U, yeah. So it's not that they're not going to be getting any; they will be getting it.
Well, and two, on top of that, it's you're right. I think an important thing for people to hear is that we're not eliminating people could hear in a quick conversation, oh, they've eliminated art, music, and PE at the high school, and that's not what's happened. We've reduced a few positions at the high school, but we still plan to be offering music and art and PE at a level that's reflective of what students have been signing up for in many ways. So as I said before during the budget conversation, as an educational leader, I hate scaling back on the number of teachers we have because that can limit sometimes some of the choice that our students have, and it can be difficult with scheduling and things like that. But I said to somebody, I said, this was hard to pass. I call it the Shaw's test, that if I was in the aisle at Shaw's and someone said, well, how many kids are in those classes? Can you tell me that this is a appropriate use of my tax dollars? And my conclusion was that I couldn't. And so that it was appropriate to scale back to, like what Troy said, what is more representative of high schools of our size around Vermont and in our region. I do have that frequently asked, the first of our frequently asked questions, and that we've got. And I think this is a good one. I'm gonna, if you guys are okay, I'll pull it up, if that's all right. And okay, great. So let me. And this one is common, especially this one's good on the heels of videos I put out in the past that have basically explained that a lot of the money, similar to what I just put in this other one, that in most of the money that is raised to pay for the $32 million that you're approving is not money that comes from Springfield. Now that always leads to other questions because people are convinced that there's no way the deal can be that good. And so that was what this frequently asked question was about. So let me pull it up. And Rick, can you talk through this a little bit?
Sure. So as Zach said earlier, dependent on the year and dependent on, the income sensitivity payments that everyone normally refers to as prebates in their tax bill. We, for every dollar that we raise from Springfield, we get somewhere between $3 and $4 from the state or from other areas in the state. It's been asked more than once over the last few years is, well, I've got to be paying for that, $21.7 million somehow. And the answer is not really, but maybe somewhat. It's a typical education funding in the state of Vermont isn't always necessarily clean and easy, but the education fund is primarily made up of property tax revenue. Roughly 76% of it is property tax revenue. But 100% of the sales and use tax. So when you go, buy a pair of sneakers at someplace in Vermont, that sales tax you pay goes into the education fund. 33% of the gas tax goes into the ed fund, and that gas tax is roughly 30 cents. 33% of the diesel tax goes into the ed fund. 25% of your meals and rooms tax, if you go out to dinner or if you go up to, pre-COVID days, if you went up to Burlington and, went to a show and stayed overnight and, did something, 25% of that would go into the ed fund. And then 100% of the lottery, the net lottery, and I don't, I'm hoping we said this okay, but obviously there's lottery sales, ticket sales that the state generates, and obviously they have to pay out winnings to somebody. Whatever that nets out, whatever that net revenue is, goes into the ed fund. So the reality is if Springfield actually reduces its budget, the likelihood that those taxes statewide are going to go down are probably slim to none. Those of you in Springfield will still be paying those taxes. They'll just go to a different community. But in the taxes that Springfield pays, doesn't equate anywhere near to $21.7 million in those other forms of taxes. The biggest chunk of that money is coming from what's called sending towns. Used to be the old Gold Town label that was around NAC 60, I think it was. They were called Gold Towns, and then they changed it in NAC 68 to sending towns. But the property-rich towns such as Stratton and Manchester, those Woodstock, those communities pay more in than they receive back. And the purpose of that is so that they can fund. And Zach has talked about this better and can probably speak to it better from an educational standpoint. But the theory is education should be equitable to every student across the state, regardless of the income wealth of a community. And this is how they balance that equitable distribution of those education funds.
Yeah, I think basically it's as an ex-social studies teacher, I might go too far in the weeds. I'll make it quick though. In the state constitution, the state is responsible for making sure that there's a good education provided to all students. And there's a court case that basically said, hey, state, if you're just relying on people's local property taxes to make sure every kid in Vermont gets a good education, we can show you that doesn't work. And it's not fair, and it doesn't work out. So state, you need to do something. And so basically the state system, and this is when it gets really hard for us at voting time, because how your schools are funded is radically different than how your town services are funded. But if you look at the ballot, it looks like they're similar, and they're really not. Behind the scenes, it's a completely different thing. And the short version is that as long as we are willing to pay the same rate as another community, we get to spend the same amount per pupil, even though our rate generates far, far, far less revenue than some other communities. So, a former employee here say equal tax communities get equal amounts to spend on students effectively. And so that's the deal. And that deal is designed specifically to help communities like ours. The whole system is designed to allow us to spend what's necessary on students without having to have, we would have to quadruple our tax rate to provide the same amount of spending if we didn't have the unique system that Vermont provides us. But we do get this question, which is kind of like, this is too good to be true, so what's the catch? And people are looking for that catch. But this is the most honest, transparent response we can give you to you. If we assume you're not spending more or less in sales tax based on how much money is going to the state education fund, or how much gas you're using this year, you're not going to make a decision at the tank based on what you think, the overall spending of all schools in the state of Vermont is going to be. Although knowing that your taxes might go up, you obviously make some decisions. But anyways, that's the core of it. And I'll put out. There'll be some additional stuff I put out. I've done this in the past to try to explain this and explain that concept and why it's a good deal for Springfield. And the second part is, even then, there's a variety of different ways that impacts people in our community, because even amongst our property tax, people who own property, most of our folks don't pay the full rate as well. So there's a lot to it, and it's very complicated, and it's easy to get lost in the weeds.
So the actual amount that they'll be voting on is what's that?
So it's 32. I got to pull it back up. I'll pull it back right up.
I sent you the ballot article, Zach. Do you want to pull that up?
I am looking for it as we speak.
So it's 32 and change, Patty. He'll pull that up. But the important thing is including non-residential property, the shopping malls and apartment houses, and stores and restaurants. Springfield will contribute about $7.5 million of that 32 million. And the residential homeowner is somewhere around 3.2 million.
We can redo the figures, but I think last year what we estimated was that the residential taxpayer in Springfield covered about 18% of the total bill. And most of it comes from these other sources. Now that when I say residential taxpayer, that doesn't include the businesses in the community who are paying a property tax and stuff. That gets us up to that got us closer to a quarter of the bill being covered by sources in Springfield. So, but it's 32.4 million is the full amount. So when people vote on our budget, they're voting to authorize us to spend a certain amount of money from the state system, where when the town budget works differently, where it's like, here's the, basically the town budget is really simple. If we have the town manager on, he'd nod and agree. You just say, well, this is how much we're going to spend on town services this year. Let's say it's $12 million. And what is the grand list? What's the value that everybody's got? Okay, we're going to take $12 million and we're going to divide it by everyone's value, and that's your tax bill. Except for a few, there's a small group of people who are in fixed incomes where that doesn't apply to you on the town side, but not a lot. It's pretty small. But on the school side, it's far more complex. So what they're really doing is authorizing us to raise, $7-8 million from Springfield so that we can spend $32.4 million on the kids of Springfield. So.
And I think that's important for the people to know that difference.
Yeah, it's hard, and we try like the Dickens to explain it, but it is complicated, and I don't blame people that struggle with it, and very often want to compare us to what they see the town spending on town services, and want to think about it as an apples to apples comparison, and it's really not, and that can be really challenging.
Yeah, I mean, the way Zach and I were talking the other day, and I forget what the town number is, 12 or 13 million dollars. I forget that number, but basically they're authorizing the town to tax people $12 million to spend $12 million.
Right.
We're asking people to let us tax $7.5 million to spend $32 million. So.
Right.
The return on investment, if you want to look at it that way, is pretty dramatic from the school's formula of what they're able to buy with their money. And I guess that's a better way to say it, is the school's purchasing power, is 4 times, what the town's purchasing power is.
I think it's important to tell people too that the reason it's stated that way on the ballot and on the voting article is that's mandated by the state, and that's not how we choose to phrase the language. We're not trying to pull a fast one. It's the state mandates that we have to state it that way, that we spend that much money on per equalized pupil, and that this year it's a reduction per pupil in equalized spending. In previous years, we've seen that number go up, but this year we're very fortunate to see that number go down. So all good things.
And there's some thought process around when the arguments were being made about how these ballot articles should be written. I might have a cynical CFO who's on the line who suspects that some of the decision to word it in these ways was specifically to try to discourage people from spending.
When did I give you the impression I suspected that?
That's what I've gleaned from our conversations in the past.
No, it's factual. There's no suspecting about it.
So that is important, and I wish we had the ability to go through every ballot with a crayon and scratch out, spend 32 million and raise 7.5 million on each of those ballots, and that was something that we tried to do in the second vote last year. I think I put out. Some people saw the video I put out where we went item by item on the ballot and talked about what percentage of the money that pays for each of these things comes from Springfield. And all of the items that were on the ballot, except for ours, are all 100% paid for by Springfield. And ours are effectively either you're paying for somewhere between a quarter and a third of what our cost is, but we put the full amount we would spend is on there for ours. And so one of the ironies of the last time around is that almost all the things that were 100% paid for by Springfield on our first vote last time passed, and the things that were only paid a quarter to a third by Springfield failed. And that a lot of that's on, I know in my job I got to do a better job of communicating to people that this is the situation in terms of thinking about value.
Is it a good segue to talk about the second ballot article, the second money article?
Yeah, I think that's super important because this is another one that if we don't do a good job of communicating it, people won't understand what we're trying to do, which is ultimately to try to help with tax rates over the next couple of years. But I just want to mention one thing before we transition to that too, is that I know we've got 25 viewers or so right now. And again, if you want to give us questions that we can respond to, you can, if you're on Facebook, right beneath where the streaming video is, in the comment section, you just write in a comment like you're commenting on a Facebook post, and we'll have the opportunity to see those questions and we can respond to some of them. Same thing on YouTube. If you're on my YouTube page right now and you're one of those viewers, there's a like a chat box off to the side where you can post questions. We'd love to get your questions and not just hear us talk, because we do a lot of board meetings where we all just talk to each other. So Rick, let me see if I can find that other question for you real quick. And I can pull that up.
Well, while you're pulling it up, let me just give a little bit of background. So last year when COVID hit and, we went remote and we had to figure out a new way to deliver services to students. We heard comments that, boy, where's all that money going? What's going to happen to all that money? Aren't we ever going to see all that money? And, yes, I mean, we ended up coming out of last year with a surplus of roughly $1.4 million. Now, the last few years, our surplus has been around $300,000. So theoretically, an extra $1.1 million that we saved, if you want to say that, from our remote model that we used. Now, many people can argue that savings came at a cost of that was detrimental to many of our students, and I wouldn't argue with that. I think there's probably a lot of truth to that. But the reality is, we didn't spend the money, and by statute, we have to give it back to the voters in the following budget process. So it actually skips a year. So the FY20, which was last year, goes into FY22, which is the next year, which is the budget we're talking about. The FY21 budget that we're currently in is humming along as it would normally do. Although we believe we're saving money there too. Although we still have a few months to go. It presented a unique opportunity to the board to do some forward thinking about, can we use these dollars to stabilize the tax rate? Because if we put the whole $1.4 million into the tax rate, you would probably see another 3-cent reduction. So we would be at close to 7-cent reduction. But there's a good chance that next year, when we built the FY23 budget, you might see a 5 or 6 cent increase. So in order to try to prevent that yo-yo or whiplash tax rate effect, and this has happened across many communities across the state, and you have to wait till you get these opportunities to do it. We were able to apply $1 million of that surplus to basically buy the rate down this year to help get it to that 3.5, 3.7 cent cut. But if the voters approve this reserve, we will be able to save some of that fund balance and help stabilize that tax rate going forward. You're muted, Zach, if you're talking.
And Rick, one thing before we get into the text of the, I've heard, people, I think people have misunderstood how much, I think people think that the full surplus coming out of last year, which was, and I wanted to just clarify, I know this, that we were concerned about what we could or could not spend in a responsible way during last year. And we had a bunch of people at home. There were a bunch of things we wanted to do that we weren't able to do last year because of COVID. And so that puts us in this unique opportunity where we can help pay down on tax rates this year and put us in a strong position to help out in the next couple. But I have had somebody ask me, and they said, "Oh, well, all you have is a $400,000 surplus, and why don't you just throw that back into tax rates?" And the answer is no. We got, it's about almost 1.1 that is going into the paying down of the tax rates, and then we've got 400 left that we think would be smart to put into this account. So, anyways, here's the actual language. So shall the voters of the Springfield Town School District create an operating expense reserve fund with an initial transfer of $400,000 from the district's FY20 surplus to be under the control of the board of school directors for the purpose of paying operational expenses that were not anticipated at the time of the budget preparation by the board. So this is similar when we've talked about other ballot articles. There's certain language we have to use in terms of the way in which we set this up. But I think the board's been what we propose to the board, and I think what the board wants to do is the purpose of putting this money aside is to stabilize, tax rates over the course of the next couple of years so that we're not doing this. And we're not in a position where we come back to you, this, like Rick was saying, hey, we've got a, 3.5 cent tax reduction this year, and then next year we whack you with a 8-cent increase. And if we don't do that, then we're gonna have to lay off tons of people. We wanna avoid that. We wanna be able to provide steady service to your kids and not also have to then jack up rates a whole bunch. But this is Article 11. And Rick, if there's anything wrong in what I just said or characterized it, please trim up what I said.
No, I think you had it. The only, I think you said 1.1 million, but it's really $1 million.
Million, sorry, yeah.
You do have a question, although it's a non-budgetary question.
Oh, I'm getting there, okay. Okay, we'll do the best we can with this one. Rob Jones, all right, why is it that if my daughter has to get a COVID test, my son is still allowed at school? If one might have it, doesn't the other? Doesn't make sense. So I don't know enough about the full situation, Mr. Jones. I can give you the quick thing. Basically, if we have people who are close contacts to a positive case inside of the school district, so we have like a teacher or a student, somebody that we find out is tested positive for COVID, we need to then go back over a 48-hour period of time, and we look at who are the close contacts, is the language that the Vermont Department of Health uses. And we work with the Department of Health, and what we do is we try to we look back at where that positive person was and look at over that couple day period, in any one 24-hour period of time, was that person within 6 feet, even if they had masks on, within 6 feet of the person who was positive. And if they are, they're considered a close contact by the Vermont Department of Health, and then they're asked to quarantine. Now, if you are a close contact, and again, I don't know anything about your specific case, but I would say this probably is what's going on. If you're a close contact of a close contact, you do not need to quarantine. And that's all based on Vermont Department of Health rules and through the governor's emergency order. So it's possible where if you have one child who was a close contact to another kid, then who was positive, or an adult that was positive, that child might have to quarantine for 7 days and then get a test, or 14 days without a test and no symptoms. But the other people in your household wouldn't have to. And I know with these rules, it's hard. It's hard sometimes, and some of it doesn't always feel like it all makes, each individual moment doesn't feel like it makes sense. But we're working really hard to follow to a T the guidance that's given to us from the Vermont Department of Health. Like I said, that is in turn fed by what's out of the governor's office. So I apologize if it feels inconsistent in some ways sometimes, but we are working really hard to be very consistent in the way in which we approach it, and that we're in line with the Department of Health. So, and if there's individual follow-up, feel free to contact my office and/or our COVID coordinator, Jenny Anderson, and we can work through if you think maybe some of what I described wasn't accurate or doesn't apply to your situation. I'm always happy to talk with families about what they're dealing with and whether or not we can do things better. It was great, and I appreciate the question. It's great that we had somebody who utilized the question box. And again, if you're on Facebook, you can see where Mr. Jones put in his question. That's you can put in stuff there, and we can be in the same boat. I can pull up a picture of your question, and we can respond to it. Are there other things that any of the three of you want to feel like are quick things that would be important for the voters to know or think about in relation to either our process or what our product is right now?
I would just say, even if you
go
can't,
back to what Roy was saying about. Okay. Go ahead, Roy.
No, Patty.
No, go ahead, Patty. Go ahead.
Okay. Okay. Well, to go back to what Troy was saying, with the reserve, I think it's important for people to understand that this year the cost is down, but next year the cost is up. So hopefully the taxes won't go up with that reserve. I think it's important for them to understand that it's like paying it forward kind of a thing.
Yeah, that's the whole point of our stabilization fund idea, so that if we pay $2,000 in taxes this year, you don't want to all of a sudden have to pay $2,500 in taxes next year, because that's a shock to the system. So we want to try and that's a big swing, but we want to try and stabilize that. So each year it's $2,100, and you can do your own personal finances and budget, so you can plan accordingly, so you don't have to have big swings in the property tax rate. So that's in essence the driver behind the tax stabilization fund. And I would just add, as board members, we're here to answer questions about your concerns about the budget, and as well as Zach and Rick. So if you can't think of something right now and you go to the website and you see something, feel free to look up our numbers on the district website. They're there. Our emails are there. Call us, email us. We'll get back to you with an answer. And if we don't know, we'll track it down for you and get back to you. So that's what we're here for. That's what you voted for us to come into office to do, and be fiscally responsible. So take us up on that offer.
Another thing I mentioned about the reserve account, when it comes to this fiscal responsibility piece too, is I think it is also, if you're worried, like, oh well, geez, they had this surplus as a result of this really unique situation, and maybe they're avoiding making the tough choices as a result of that. I think the proof is in the pudding this year, in that we've given back a bunch of money. We've reinvested that money into reducing tax rates. We're setting aside $400,000. We're asking to set aside $400,000. We still cut positions this year, and I think there are boards who would take the fiscal stewardship would say, well, let's not do the 400,000. What we'll do is we'll just cover those positions again for another year. Let's kick the can down the road. And that's not what this board did. And that's tough to do, but I also think it speaks to the seriousness of trying to be responsible and get what we want for kids, and at the same time, always keeping an eye on what's appropriate in terms of what can the community afford. Even in a situation where we're getting a great deal from the state, it's still taxes are taxes, and taxes are hard for people, especially in a COVID environment. So I just wanted to keep that in people's in the front for people too, that we still made reductions this year, even though there was all this surplus money.
We had some great community help out there
We
to help
we
the
did.
board with the budget this year. Some really good community help out there.
Yep. Any other stuff? Rick, anything else that would be maybe if we move to sign off thought from you, something that you want voters to think about?
I would just hope they give a lot of thought to the reserve fund, because, as I said earlier, it's a rare opportunity that the stars align that gives a district a chance to begin to put together a long-range plan. Because often, everyone talks about, can we have a 3-year plan? Can we have a 5-year plan? And in the finance world, in the education finance world, it's very difficult, because we're constantly reacting to changes from either the state or federal funding sources that we sometimes have to fill or cut or whatever as a result. This gives us an opportunity to start to think about a long-range plan and start to think about a long-term taxing situation. Because I truly believe, some of the best economic development in the community is a strong school and a stable tax rate. And, if we can achieve both of those with this rare opportunity we have, as Patty said, I think it'll start to pay it forward.
I was gonna start moving us towards wrap up, but I have another question surrounding enrollment. And Rick, I don't know if you can. I've got some of the numbers, but I think I don't have one portion. I don't have the pre-K numbers, but I'm gonna pull up the question real quick. So, question is, how many students are enrolled in the district right now? So, of the enrollment projections we had put out in the budget packet for this year, we were sitting at this year at 1,119.
And add to that 140 pre-Ks.
And then 140 pre-K. So we are, let's go 22. So 2. So we'll call it about 1,250 students pre-K to 12. Of course, our pre-K operation is through private providers, and we oversee private pre-K, licensed pre-K people in the community for 10 hours a week for kids. So pre-K to 12, about 1,260 is what we're looking at. So another question. So if I vote yes, I'll see a long-range plan, a 5-year plan, better tax rates, and lower school budgets in 5 years. So it's a great question. I mean, what you have right now is we have the bones of that. The big parts and structure of that plan is the strategic plan you can see online. It has the work that we did. It's about a year and a half old at this point, around the vision. We worked with community partners, develop a new vision, mission, values for the school district, and then 8, 9 strategic goals that we thought were most important over this next stretch. So my goal, during the time when I am still here, would be to move us towards two things. One is to be over the state average in all of our tested areas, and we have some room to grow in relation to that, and also get us into the solidly into the middle of tax rates inside of the state of Vermont. And right now we're in the top, I think on the school district side in terms of rates, we're in the top 20% or so. I want to get us down into like the middle 30% is where I would want to be over that next stretch, and then have scores up above. The board, I think the board might even be more aggressive in what the hopes are for what we can do. But that is the plan. Better outcomes. Test scores are one means of determining whether or not we're being successful, and there's a bunch of different things we've been talking about lately and continue to talk about in terms of our overall level of success. And then the desire to get tax rates, again, even though the vast majority of people in our community don't pay those rates, still to get those rates down. So, but that's my 2 cents, and the board is in a much better position to speak to where you want to be.
I would just say if we're talking about the tax stabilization fund, voting yes for that would allow for not wild swings in our tax bills. So the goal there is to not, like I said before, not see wild swings, to kind of normalize it, because with the education funding we can see some wild swings in our tax bills, and we want to normalize that. And then I echo what Zach said. We're in the top 20% of school taxes. We want to see that go down, but at the same time, we want to continue to offer a great education for the kids in the district, and we're working to do that by looking at test scores, other metrics that we can use to see student success, and sometimes those two things will go hand in hand, and sometimes they'll collide against each other, and you just have to weigh the two and as a community and balance out which is more important to us. So that's what we try and do. Patty?
No, I'm good.
Okay. It looks like you looked like you wanted to jump in, so I wasn't sure.
No. I was listening. I was listening very intensely.
Who? I got a hi from Rose Thompson, so I'm not. So I'm grabbing it. Hi, Rose. So thanks for watching, spending some time. Those of you who are putting in a little bit of time checking this stuff out, I really appreciate it. We desperately want to have more direct communication with folks in the community about what do we do, why do we do it, where's the money going, what are the things you're trying to do to improve the district. I mean, those are conversations we want to be having a lot. And so for people to hang on and to spend a little bit of time on YouTube or Facebook listening to us talking, I really appreciate it. Oh, now we're gonna get more highs. All right, great, that's good. So I had Rick give his kind of last thoughts on things. Patty, any one thing you want to say to voters for at least for tonight?
We've worked very, very hard, and we've gone over all the numbers. I don't even know how many times. We've done what I feel is a fair and just budget, and I hope people that can support us on that.
Great. Troy?
I would just continue to echo, reach out with questions. There's always questions about a school budget. It's really complicated and hard to understand. We're here to answer those questions so that you can get a better understanding of if you want to vote yes or if you want to vote no. It's really about educating yourself about the budget and understanding it so you can make an informed vote.
Yeah, and I would say we want
to do that is be on the budget committee next year.
And that's a great way. And being part of the process to get to this point is really a great way to find out about budgets. And it's good too that Stacy's chiming in at the right time too. So Stacy was a great member of our budget committee this year, and and she just did really, really good work. And so I appreciate and it was great because she pushed us in a couple of different ways that were wonderful, and it's good to be pushed. And we, as I've said to people, before, I know the key thing for us is to have trust with the community. Like, that is the whole game, especially with a budget as complicated as ours. If you already come from a place of being like, I don't know if I trust this whole operation, it's really hard because it's so complicated. There's a lot of places where you kind of have to trust us unless you do the question asking. And we desperately want you to ask us the questions. Ask us the questions. We'll give you the fairest answer we can to what we're trying to do, why we put money in certain places. We'll be honest about the places where we made our best guesses about what we would need, because all of this is right now we're planning for, a budget that is going to affect 16 months from now, is going to be impacted by the decisions we make on March 2nd. So we really, really want to work with all of you to answer your questions and be as transparent as we can be. And I know that that there are some of you who struggle to trust the schools sometimes, and we're going to do our best to do everything we can to help you trust the schools. So that's all I got. If you guys are good, I think we're running up about to our hour, and we're out of questions. So maybe we wrap it for tonight and see if we can maybe do another one down the road.
Yep. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. I really appreciate it.
Have a good
Thanks,
night.
everyone.